everyone. I've already shown you all my slides, so I'm probably just going to go home now. To be completely honest with you, I normally spend my time in a small padded room talking to myself, so basically anything is a treat. Over the next half hour, I'm going to talk about directing voice actors, because the same questions and problems keep cropping up again and again, and it's absolutely nobody's fault. I thought if I could just get us together and talking about how to get the best out of voice actors, we can relieve a lot of anxiety on both sides. We all know about games that have really dreadful voice acting. We do. And I know it means that an awful lot of developers are really anxious about using voice actors, and a lot of the time they maybe think about not using them at all. I'm going to forgive Dave for writing some of the voice acting out of Unavowed. We'll talk about it. Personally, I think that a lot of the problems with voice acting stem from coming from different disciplines and having completely different ways of talking about getting where we're going. So what I want to do today is sort of bridge the gap and give you a vocabulary to get the best out of weird people like me. We're not all weird, I'm weird. Right, so first things first, this will be a shock to you. You won't have seen this slide before. This is me. I am Sally Beaumont, and I have been a voice actor for 15 years and working in games for 10. And yeah, I'm quite uncomfortable with showing off. I am British. I also have a bunch of additional experience in things like playwriting, screenwriting, theatre directing, and directing voice acting. So I think I can bring a sort of an overview to the whole process. It's pretty hard to take one element in isolation, and I do understand that a lot of developers are wearing a lot of different hats and trying to do a bunch of different things. If I am completely honest, I think I have the best job in the world. I get to do funny voices for extraordinary games that I could just never have imagined existed, and I get to work with some of the most passionate, committed people, and I get to help them make their game come to life. For me, there is actually something magical about getting into a developer's brain and working out what they want the voice to sound like, and then the voice takes on a life of its own and becomes something that actually sometimes neither of us were expecting. If there is one thing that I want you to take away from today, it is, I promise you, it really is fun. By the end of this little talk, we're going to have you ready to direct your first session, and I want you to have loads more confidence to ask for the performance that you really want for your game. So, first things first, where do you find voice actors? This is going to sound really obvious, but ask other developers. That's a great way to know if someone's easy to work with, if they've got a handle on technology or not, and if they really do know what they're doing. One of the other ways is that if you play a game and you're struck by the voice acting, guess what? That voice actor is available to hire. A lot of us have websites, and we'll have an agent, but we'll also work independently as well, so you can contact us online. And as I say, we have the best job in the world. We love our work, and if you approach us with politeness, with respect, just basic professional stuff, you'd actually be surprised at who might want to work on your game, even if you're right at the start of your career. So if you are going to do something like put out a casting on Twitter, you need to be prepared to receive a lot of applications of variable quality. So one of the ways you can limit that is to be as precise as you can when you're putting out a breakdown. So maybe something like this. So you can see there's age, gender where it's appropriate. Are they human? Which, you know, that's not something that comes up in everyone's job. Am I human today? Accent. Vocal quality. So this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just some ideas. Once you start listening to other people's voices, you realise there are a million different ways of changing voices and describing voices. Character qualities. I am obviously in the likes list, and or I love slashes. Maybe a 3-sentence backstory. We don't need a huge amount of information, but we do need something. So where they came from, where they are, and where they're going is quite a useful way of putting that. The style of your game and the style of the acting, that's going to be very different. That's going to affect the auditions that you get. And lastly, whether you're looking for reels or custom demos. Now, firstly, I want you to take a look at the difference between vocal qualities and character qualities. So here is an opportunity to make some interesting choices about your characters. Sometimes, yes, you do need specific vocal qualities. Say, for example, 2 characters are played by the same person, so they need to sound more different. But a lot of the time, we just make a bunch of assumptions about what a voice should sound like. We've all heard that tough guy voice who sounds really gruff. Please forgive me, that's not my casting type. But we've heard it a lot. And it might be interesting to leave that vocal quality section pretty vague and let people apply to you with character qualities instead. Is there a different way that a tough guy could sound? Is there the way that this tough guy feels that can come through rather than being prescriptive about the specific vocal qualities that they have? When you leave yourself open to stuff like that, you might have something that comes completely out of left field, but it's perfect. So, this is a bit of a bugbear of mine. Accent is not character. A lot of the time you'll get a script and it will have just the accent, as if I'm supposed to glean everything about a person from their nationality or the area that they come from. Yes, accent means things to people. Of course it does. There's a huge amount of academic study into this. Things like, should you put a British voice in your American-based game? How will the audience perceive that? What does that mean? In the UK, something like having an Edinburgh accent is considered to be very friendly and approachable. Having a Birmingham accent apparently makes you sound stupid, which actually makes me really annoyed. If you're thinking about doing a really clever character, this is my shout out to you to say, maybe make them a Brummie. Yeah. If you're giving us different accents because you're worried that we might not be able to differentiate different characters, I want to reassure you that there are just a myriad of different ways of changing voices. And that's our job to handle, and you don't need to worry about that too much. If you can leave it up to your voice to come up with differences, you're going to avoid that thing where it is very clearly one guy in your game, but he is inexplicably British, American, Russian, French, and Spanish, but very clearly the same guy for no reason at all. So I've said choosing to receive reels or custom demos. So a reel is a collection of clips from previous games, or sometimes the voice will specifically record these clips to show off their range. And they can give you a good idea of whether somebody would be good to pick up a bunch of NPCs, for example, if they've just got good range. And you know, you can bring them in and go, oh, I think this one, this one, this one, but with a bit of a difference would be great. But if you've got a specific character and a specific accent, or you feel like you really need to see a specific thing from a performer, then a custom demo is a good way to go. If you're going to do a custom demo, you need to choose some script. And one of the best things you can do is choose a pivotal moment. At the very least, you can choose something where your character is taking action or reacting. And if you want to choose two pieces, do make sure they're contrasting, so you can see two different sides of this person. They don't need to be long. A few sentences is absolutely fine, and actually when you're working through a big stack, you will start to make decisions really quickly, and you'll hear very quickly what works and what doesn't. You'll get a sense for that quite swiftly. We're going to go into characterisation a lot more later on, but for casting purposes, what you're listening for is somebody who can lift a script. So they sound like they're making it up as they go along, rather than reading aloud from the script, which is what I am doing now. You're also listening for somebody who understands characters don't always mean what they say or say what they mean. So people who understand subtext. You're also looking for somebody who can keep a character going, particularly if it's an unusual accent. You can keep a character going for more than a few seconds. If you're in doubt and you're deciding between people, choose someone nice. Choose someone that you enjoy spending time with. Someone who's keen to understand your point of view and also brings a few ideas of their own. And bonus points if they get your sense of humour and they understand all your weird pop culture references. That genuinely can help. It's a little bit like dating in that respect. So, before you put out your casting, you're going to have to decide whether you want to record locally or you want to record remotely. So there's a lot of options that technology can give us now. If you're recording locally, you need to hire a studio and bring your actors to you, or if you're Dave, you set up a recording studio in your apartment. And yeah, there's a number of differences between local and remote recording that you need to have a think about what would suit your project. So in terms of local, you get to meet them in person and bond with them in a lovely way. If you are, say, recording in New York and you need authentic New York accents, hey, record locally. It's probably the best way to get hold of them. You do need to hire, build, and pay for a studio for yourself. And you have to implement everything I'm about to tell you with someone looking at you. Yeah, remotely, no one can see you sweating. So if we're looking at remotes, if you're looking for something really unusual, so I'm at the moment I'm casting something where we're looking for somebody with quite an unusual accent, and remote is pretty much the only way we're going to find them, and then we can choose from the whole world. The technology has come on such that the vast majority of voices have their own studio. If you like meeting people, fine, but if you don't have to meet them. I don't know, maybe this has made you feel like you don't want to meet voice actors, I don't know. If you are massively introverted, it can be a boon to just be, say, on the phone, on Skype, and you know they can't see you rolling your eyes or fretting or doing a number of other things. Yeah, the studio cost is usually involved in the fee, so included in the fee rather, so you know you get a one price that way. And with remote, you can direct as little or as much as you like. Yeah, I like working remotely. I work remotely a lot, and it's given me the chance to work with people all over the world. And actually, sometimes people in the same town, which is really odd, but yeah, and it's given me the chance to work on really unusual projects, none of whom knew that I was still in my pyjamas. Any voice actor who says they haven't done a job in their pyjamas is lying. Yeah, so however you're going to choose to work with your voice actors, there are a bunch of tips I can give you to get the performance that you want, and to just make the process a whole lot smoother, my absolute top tip is... I can feel your enthusiasm for this. Not saying you're predictable or anything. No one wants to do this. But it is one of the best ways of improving your script and making sure that you don't run into problems in the recording booth later. I don't want you to read it in your head. I don't want you to read it and kind of, yeah, that seems absolutely fine, yeah, that's fine, yeah, it's perfect. I want you to read it out loud professionally, well, not professionally, preferably with somebody else in the room. This is not about whether you can act, this is about working out, is this dialogue or is this literature? And there's a huge difference. Things feel really different when you say them out loud. For example, combinations of consonants communicate concepts we cannot control. Sometimes things are difficult to say out loud and seem fine on the page. Have a think about how real people speak. Listen to people when you walk around. And think about the universe of your game. How do people speak within the universe of your game? Have a look at your script and see if there is room to breathe. You'll find that when you read sentences, you'll have to stop and take a big breath sometimes because your brain doesn't need to breathe in the middle of sentences. You can sort of work out where the breaths might go by saying, roughly, a full stop is a full breath, and a comma is usually a pause or a little pick-up breath sometimes. The punctuation is a really useful code that you can use to reach out to your voice actors. A punctuation point sometimes means a change of thought, a change of direction, sometimes time to reflect. Your punctuation can show thought processes. Another thing to think about is differing sentence length. It keeps a listener interested by using sentences of different lengths. And think about whether you can get your character to say something neatly in a short sentence before creating a huge long sentence with lots and lots of clauses. And that's a key feature of spoken language, is that we can get to the point, and sometimes not. When you read your script aloud, which you're all going to do now, right? You might notice that a sentence needs the emphasis pointed out. Okay. I want you to be really sparing about this sort of thing. Only really use this kind of emphasis if the sentence could be massively changed in meaning by misunderstanding where the emphasis goes. So each of these 4 sentences means something very different. And you, having worked on your game lovingly for so long, know exactly where that should go. But for me, coming fresh to the project, I don't necessarily. Yeah, so you've sort of noticed that I've spent a lot of time on preparation. There's a heck of a lot that you can avoid in the booth, and there's a lot of speeding up you can do by just preparing in advance. I know it's kind of boring and it's like homework, but really what you want to be able to do is relax and pay attention to what's really happening in the booth and listen to what your voice actor's doing. Now, when you actually get in there, I want you to offer them a seat, glass of water, just make them comfortable. They're not machines, they are human beings, I promise, except when they're not being human beings. Yeah, but be kind to them. Make sure that you offer them regular breaks, because voice acting is surprisingly hard work. We're concentrating, we're pulling in a lot of different things, we're monitoring what you're asking for. And you'll also find that you get tired really fast too, because it's very demanding listening and making sure that you're getting just the right tone. When you record, it's pretty standard to record single lines 3 times in a row. which is often known as your ABCs. And it's the same with non-linear scenes. That gives you 3 options with slightly different intonation to choose from when you edit later. So it increases the likelihood that you're going to have just the right take. And it also gives you plenty to procrastinate over later. If the scene is linear, it's also worth doing a take which is a run all the way through. This actually helps your voice actors to understand the flow of the scene, the sort of shape of the scene, if you like, if there's a crisis point, if there's a joke payoff. Just to warn you that I'm coming back tomorrow. I'm going to be helping out on John Ingold's talk, and we're going to be talking about linear and non-linear dialogue, and he's going to make me do some sight reading, and I genuinely have no idea what we're going to do. So if you enjoy watching me be panicked and confused some more, do come along to that. For me, I think directing voice acting is about having a really light touch. Everybody that I've worked with who's been great has given me plenty of information up front and then trusted me. One of the things that you might be surprised about is the voice actor might go a bit too far into it. And that might be a bit shocking, but our job is to give you as much as we possibly can, and then you to rein us back in or point us towards the right thing. And it's much easier to rein somebody enthusiastic in than it is to encourage somebody out of their shell. We are there to sort of explore the character, to find out who they might be, and sometimes, yes, to surprise you with things that maybe you didn't expect your character to be. And then you get to choose later on which elements work and which don't. So, this is one of my favourite quotes. In my opinion, humans are reactive. We're social creatures and we're constantly adapting to the situations we find ourselves in and the people that we meet. If you play a character, you need to know what you're reacting to. If you can, let your voice actors hear one another. Recording all together is basically impossible most of the time. Financially, it's usually not possible. But you can record your lead actor first and then have your supporting characters bounce off of that performance. And you don't need to play them every single line. Sometimes just giving them a flavour of the style of performance, the level of performance that they're giving can really help. So sometimes I will receive a script and it has no context. This is the most on-brand slide of my presentation, by the way. If you are British, you will know that this sentence can mean literally anything. We use it for everything. When I receive the script, I start to think, am I apologising? Am I being sarcastic? Did I just miss what you said? I'm sorry. What am I apologising for? Is it a big thing? Is it a small thing? Do I mean it? And I suppose I could give you a sort of neutral read. I'm sorry. But that could very easily ruin a really important moment in the game and it could stand out like a sore thumb. The trouble is, without any context, I'm not reacting. And if I'm not reacting, I'm guessing. And if we're going to play a guessing game where I sort of think I know what you're asking for and then you're getting the take and going, well, that's not what I had in my head, and we're playing this back and forth guessing game, it's going to go on forever and we're both going to get frustrated. There's also the point you reach where you just go, it's fine. We've all got there. We've all reached that point, and if you can't reach across and find the words to say, no, I need it like this, you can sometimes give up and it can be really demoralising. Try not to give line reads. Very rarely do the things that would come out of our mouths sound like they sound in our heads. You might know exactly what I'm sorry sounds like, but you may not be able to perform it, and then having me repeat that, you're starting to get a performance which is somebody doing an impression of somebody else and pretending, and that's not going to sound authentic. We want to avoid faking emotions, very much so. So how are we going to get there? How do we work out what that means? I love this slide because it sounds like I've woken up from a very long coma. Who is the president? Some of you who've worked with voice actors before may have been asked some versions of these questions. Possibly the most sort of hammy that you know of is, what's my motivation? Which is useful, but I don't like to ask it for it that way. But yeah, so if we work through these W questions, you don't need to have a sort of a novel written about each one of these, but if you know going in, and you can give your voice actor an idea before they start recording, you're going to make the process a lot faster. So, where is the character? The way that I would deliver a line, if I'm at a really loud gig, is totally different to the way that I would do it if I was in the back row of a funeral. I hope. Think about whether the character is comfortable where they are. Are they somewhere new? Think about the ways that you speak in different places throughout your day. When could mean what century, and it could also mean what time of day. And it can inform whether the accent is an old-fashioned version or a modern one. And it can also mean more subtle things like whether this is like a late-night chat or something momentous has just happened or is about to happen. What? What is happening? No, really, what is happening? It seems obvious to you. You've been working on your game for so long and it's in your blood. But for somebody who's coming in fresh, we need to know. I don't know what is going on in a scene, and often in many other parts of my life, unless someone tells me. For example, you'll sometimes get an unusual word, and I'll see an unusual name, for example, and I don't know if that's a mythical city, or a much-loved leader, or a fatal disease. And the way that I'm going to say that name is going to be completely different depending on that. You don't necessarily need to give me a huge backstory on characters, but if you say something like, Fred is your little brother, and growing up, he always got whatever he wanted, and now you think of him as kind of spoiled. I know what I'm going to do when we talk about Fred. Under what, it also is, what is your game? I know this is the kind of sentence that will make you cry. Dave's talk about what is your focus is really useful for that. What is your focus? What is this game? What are you trying to achieve? You don't need to have your manifesto ready to go, but I do need to know, say, any references or themes that you've got. For example, the performance that you want from a Monty Python-inspired romp is going to be really different from a naturalistic dystopian fable about the ills of capitalism. Although I do kind of want to see those two things mashed together. Who? Characterization. Who am I? You can use the basics from that casting call that you saw earlier and build up a bigger picture from that. It can also be useful to think about what the character's purpose is in the game. You can sometimes do this through archetypes, not stereotypes. A hero, a villain, a comic foil, these are all really well-worn tropes. Archetypes have a sort of universal quality to them. And they're used a lot in cinema, television, stage, and I would encourage you to go and find out lots more about archetypes if you're into storytelling. There really isn't time for me to go into all how interesting they are. Who is also going to cover who am I talking to? I speak very differently to my mother than I do to strangers, which is a very good thing. Who we are speaking to completely changes the scene. So please let us know. Are these people close? Who has the power in this relationship? Is their relationship different now to before? Why? Why? This is the biggie. It's the thing that often gets left out of directing. It's the thing that causes a lot of confusion. Why am I saying this particular line? It doesn't have to be deep and meaningful. Sometimes it can be, I'm saying this to make my friend laugh. That's fine. Sometimes it's more complicated, like this line foreshadows something that's going to happen to this character later. Sometimes it reveals something fundamental about the character. Some actors find it useful to have a verb that explains a particular line. This can help particularly with isolated lines on non-linear dialogue. If you're working remotely or you're working by phone, by phone or Skype, this can be a really useful shorthand. So this is actually how I worked on guard duty. Hi Nathan, he's in the back, sick chicken. So Nathan met me last year at Adventure X and he knows a bunch of my other silly voices. So he kind of knew that I would understand his sense of humour and sent me a script that was like this. You can tell I'm a professional writer, can't you? This is actually a really useful exercise for your writing. Again, it's really difficult to pull apart what's writing, what's directing. If you can look at the verb that goes with your line, you can sometimes see whether you're repeating the same sentiment over and over again, or if there's no real purpose for that line at all. A good voice actor is able to tell you things with a breath, a sigh, a noise. So you don't always need to say, I am so angry with you right now, which is a thing that comes up. Have a think about other ways that you could show that. Sorry. It's all right, I can only see Rosa. Blackwell joke! Yeah, you need to leave some room for the actor to do their thing. Again, this is the difference between literature and dialogue. Give us space to flesh out this person. Maybe you could show that they're angry by, I don't know, being overly critical of something else, being passive-aggressive, kicking something on the way out of the door. Maybe just a Marge Simpson noise. There's a reason that's a classic. When you leave room for things like this, for subtext, you create characters that are a lot more complex and believable. So, okay, I will go back to directing now. It's basically impossible for me to pull these things apart, and I know that most of you are going to be doing all of these things together. I know. We're gonna jump to the quick and dirty section now. So we've done all the what's my motivation. We are serious performers here, and we are going to jump to NPCs. Sometimes you have a character crop up and they just have a couple of lines and then they go away again. And you don't need to create a full backstory for these people. Who has the time? So sometimes there's useful shorthands. So a good one is as if. So actors talk about the magic what if. I like to think of it as more just having slightly bonkers ideas. So it's as if this person was in fact a squirrel. You know how that person would sound. It's as if this security guard was a migraine. So this next one. Okay, yes, I have a vested interest in this one. But it just makes sense. If you've got a male voice actor and they're struggling to do all 400 different NPCs, and you have a female voice actor who's doing 3, guess what? You could use that person. The world is full of people of different genders and no gender, and it's worth thinking about whether your world could be a little bit more like that. It's also a lot more interesting to listen to. Pop culture. Now remember I said that it's useful to get your actor's sense of humour and for them to understand your silly references. Well, sometimes it can be really useful to get to characters. So one example I had was this person is a bit like, they're from the southern states and they're sitting on their back porch on their rocking chair with their shotgun. And they're warning the local, this stranger, that the locals are a little vicious. But they're from the West Country. Ooh, you don't want to go up to the big house. Right? And you can actually go even further, and it's not an impression, but a famous character that you know. So one of the ones I did on Bertram Fiddle was Sybil Fawlty, but jolly. Oh, I'm far too busy whisking to talk. So it's a useful shorthand. It's not an impression, so I don't get sued by anyone. But it's a useful way to get into a quick character. The secret of directing is actually casting the right people and then having a really light touch and letting them do their job. You give them as much information as you possibly can to let them do that job. In the booth, you'll find that your voice actor gets into a kind of groove and you won't want to interrupt them. You'll just, every so often, course correct. And it'll feel so much easier and a little bit like magic is happening. Lastly, if you work with a voice actor and you love them and they did great work, tell everybody you know. Seriously, we need that publicity. And it's also pretty obvious to you that you love the voice work, but it's not necessarily obvious to us. Sometimes we'll walk away from a session going, oh, that was awful, that was terrible. And actually the developer is delighted. Recommend us to other developers. Talk about us on Twitter. This is a great way to say thank you for a really good session. I honestly, and you'll know this from listening to me, I could talk about voice acting and directing voice acting for hours and hours, but you won't let me. But I hope this has given you a good overview of what it's going to be like, and I really want to encourage you to get out there and work with us and have fun. I don't know if we have time for questions, in which case, he's taken it away again. Also, for the massively introverted among you, there are some cards down here for the break if you desperately can't speak to another human being. But yeah, this is me. And thank you so much for being such a lovely audience and being interested.